Hey, 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 and welcome to Terry Messenger's Genius Zone. And this is the place and the space where you get something really powerful and life changing every single week. Now, the lady that I am about to bring on is going to be offering something very powerful. Her knowledge, her own personal experience, and of course, her certification as an advanced grief recovery specialist. Now, this lady, Dawn Jackson, believes in infinite possibilities as a trainer. She is an international best-selling author, registered nurse, and a passionate advocate for emotional healing and heart restoration. So with no further ado, let's bring on the beautiful Dawn Michele Jackson. Hello, Dawn.
Hi, Terry. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with everyone today.
Awesome, awesome. So now let's ask you, where are you?
I live in Oregon in the United States.
Okay, so you are right on the other side of the world, which is so incredible. So I guess it goes to show that we are really in a timeless zone because it's man-made, isn't it? Because if your time is one time and my time is another, then someone made it up. So,
Right.
yeah, we're going to be talking about a lot of these supernatural elements that are involved in grief. And, I guess to kick off, because I feel that what you told me backstage is extremely relevant for many people that will be tuning into this once we go to air on our podcast and right around the world. So people consider grief as, I guess, often a loss or a death of a loved one. You actually thought this yourself until you became obviously a specialist in the field. Would you like to firstly talk us through what loss is and what it really means? Because some people may not even understand what they're feeling and why.
I would love to, Terry. Thank you so much. I think when most of us hear the word grief, it's like that elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. It's uncomfortable. And so many people equate it to death. But the truth is that grief comes as a result from any loss that we experience in our life, any transition or significant change. So when you move, when you change jobs, when your children move out, when your relationship breaks up, when you start experiencing health issues or financial issues, when your loved ones are struggling, those all create grief in our hearts. And so, one of the things that I really work on is educating people because it is that elephant in the room. And I want people to understand that grief is the result of so many things because that starts the conversation. Because so many times grievers don't feel heard because no one wants to talk about those scary things. But these are things that we all experience in our lives.
And we know too as coaches that awareness is extremely powerful.
Mhm.
So for that person out there that may have broken up with a loved one or felt abandoned or deserted by someone who didn't necessarily lose them via death, it could be a breakthrough just by hearing what Dawn has generously explained, by knowing that it's not necessarily about the loss and the death of a loved one. So, one of the things we also recognize on the Genius Zone, and it comes with a lot of the authenticity about our show, and when people are choosing and selecting their mentor, their coach, their healer to work with. there's a very important piece to this puzzle, and that is being able to define your own personal experience. Mm-hmm. And what you actually did express backstage, and I thought this was beautifully put, is that there were 3 significant emotional events. Mm-hmm. And of course, then came the divorce inside of that. Mm-hmm. And what that, how that played a very significant role, and you had a kind of an awakening about that. Can you talk us through those 3 significant emotional events? Because I do feel that it's really important for people to know that you don't have to be dealing with everything. Sometimes by dealing with the significant elements, it has a domino effect. So over to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's interesting because when I walked into the certification training to be a grief recovery method specialist, I didn't realize I had experienced so many grieving events in my life. But the truth is that we all experience them from childhood on. And so I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was an alcoholic and my parents were divorced. And then my stepfather was an alcoholic. So I grew up, trying to navigate that and always trying to be the good child because I didn't want any more tension to be in the household than already was based on the addiction. And so in my teenage years, which are really impressionable years, I ended up in my first romantic relationship. And I thought, well, this is great. This is someone who's, giving me this loving attention, or so I thought. But as time went on, I recognized that it wasn't a healthy relationship. It was physically, emotionally, and verbally abusive. And I found myself stuck. It became my normal pattern in this relationship. I didn't know how to get out of it. And it took years to finally step out of it. But when I did, I didn't realize that there was so much on my heart that needed healing. And I didn't have those tools, right? Because most of us don't learn those things, when we're young. And so I ended up entering a marriage with a really loving person. He was always good to me. But the problem is I brought all this baggage in, which was my emotional pain, because I didn't know how to process it. And I didn't even realize that I had it. But, I didn't have good communication skills. I had a lot of anger inside from the things that I'd gone through. And so sadly, we ended up divorced. And at that time, I was devastated and I couldn't see my part. I wasn't able to understand that it was my emotional pain from the past that really had led to the destruction of my marriage.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. That does, to me, it makes a lot of sense because number one, for the people tuning in and listening to the podcast, what you said about things becoming your normal, this is a very real thing. So you don't know what you don't know. So if you're going through something and you've never experienced this freedom before, that Dawn is going to unleash throughout this broadcast, and come to us with some very powerful tips at the end. So you want to definitely stay to the end. For something to be your normal allows you to tolerate it. And right. you will continue to get what you tolerate. Mm-hmm. The other interesting point that I do want to point out is that wherever we go, we take ourselves with us. Yeah. So if we take the old baggage with us, so for example, you've gone into this, wonderful marriage and you felt that you were with a perfectly good marriage person, etc. However, what you didn't realize is that what came with it was all your baggage that you hadn't dealt with. And I feel that is absolutely pertinent for our listeners to hear, because they'll be able to see that, oh my gosh, is that the reason that I'm leaving a trail of destruction behind?
Mhm.
Because I haven't dealt with the past. And this is what makes it so incredibly powerful to be able to go through and have a person, a specialist like Dawn, who can move you through the process, because not only is it going to help you release the grief, the loss, and the associated feelings, but it's going to help you to move forward in a way that is going to give you so much freedom.
Mhm.
So, I see that your mother did the same thing. She married a man who was an alcoholic, and then she moved on to another man who was also an alcoholic. So you can see how that goes from generation to generation. So obviously, facing that devastation of losing your husband, do you think that was the turning point? Because I know that you mentioned backstage that you pursued a few things, workshops, mission trips. Would you like to walk us through that? Because I think people need to know that as well, because they may run to the other side of the world to try and get away from themselves, or, think that something that is quite superficial is going to change things when it doesn't. So let's hear your story.
Yeah, certainly. So, after my divorce, there was a lot of blaming that came from me. You didn't want to stay married to me. You left our son and me, and I couldn't see my side of it. I couldn't understand. And maybe I didn't want to at that point take any ownership. And I didn't know how to move forward. I was devastated. And I remember, putting my son to bed at night and then just crying and, wishing that my husband would come back. And he didn't. And I will share a story about that at the end of this that I think is really pertinent. But I actually decided I was going to outfocus. I was going to put my energy on helping other people because maybe that would help me. And I didn't know how to help myself. So, as a nurse, I started volunteering to be a part of surgical mission trips to underdeveloped countries. So, we did surgery, plastic surgery, cleft lips and palates, and repaired this malformation on children who'd never had a normal life until our team arrived in their town. So I felt very fulfilled, and I did multiple of these each year. But as time went on, I started to notice that while those were really fulfilling, there was still something in my heart that didn't feel right. And I didn't know what it was. And so I started kind of doing some personal growth work. I picked up a lot of books and read them. I did workshops, and I noticed that things were shifting a little bit, but I still felt this degree of pain in my heart, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, well, maybe this is just me, and maybe I don't know how to feel joy and happiness, and I'm always going to feel this pain inside. And then I met someone who decided to go to get certified to be a grief recovery method specialist and paid for me to go. And my words were, I don't know why I would need to do that because I don't have any grief. Well, day one, I showed up, and because I had in my mind that grief was just about death. And while I'd had some grandparents pass away, I didn't have anybody that I was super close pass away. And so I stepped into the room, and within the first hour, when they talked about what grief actually is, the normal, natural response to any significant change or loss in our lives, I couldn't believe it because I realized, oh, wow, my life, I've had so many grieving events, but that's not how I characterized it. And I just figured that that was normal because all these things can normally happen in our life, but I didn't have the tools to process them. So that's kind of how I ended up in the certification training and started doing the work to heal the pain that had been keeping me stuck and unable to live the joyous life that I desired.
That is just so incredibly powerful. And, you know, in one of the elements that you utilize, having become a specialist, and by the way, wow, about what you were doing on your missions for children and plastic surgery, because that's, you know, that's a big form of healing their lives, even though it wasn't enough for you personally. But see, the fact is, it doesn't matter what you do or what your zone of genius is in life. When you can get to the core and you can do the healing that Dawn has done and that she specializes in, that is when your world will change and things will elevate in such a powerful and incredible way. And one of those elements in the process of grief recovery was busting the myths around grief. So, what are some of those myths? Is it about time healing? Is it about replacing loss? What is it?
You hit two of them right on the head. So one of them is that it just takes time. And, you know, I love to lead women's retreats, and I always ask women, can you raise your hand if something still hurts your heart that happened over a year ago? And everybody raises their hand. And then I go to 5 and 10 and 15. And I say to individuals, or I ask them, if our hearts healed within time, wouldn't you think 15 years or 10 years or 5 years is enough?
Who's got time for that?
Right.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
It's not time, it's what we do with the time. Time will just pass. It's kind of like when you get a flat tire on the road. If you just sit there, it's never going to reinflate. Like you need to do something to reinflate the tire. And the same happens with us. When our heart hurts, we're experiencing sadness. When we're grieving, we need to do something. We need to take some action. So that is definitely one of the myths. Another one is that keeping busy will help us move forward, will help us heal. And so, you know, I'm sure almost everyone can say that they've used this as a coping mechanism before. Keep busy, because then you're just going to forget and everything will turn out fine. But keeping
when people can't stop, isn't it? You see these people that are just go, 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 and really they're running away from themselves.
Right.
In many ways.
Yeah, because if you stop, what happens? You start thinking. And so people don't want to think when their heart hurts. I mean, it happens to all of us. So that's another one. Replacing the loss is big. And you see this in relationships all the time. You know, oh, this relationship didn't work out, so we're going to get into another relationship. Or when we're kids and we have an animal, our dog dies or a cat dies, and our family goes out and buys us another one. But we're still grieving the one that we just lost.
Yeah, that does make so much sense. You know, when I first met my husband, Dawn, back in 2006, his wife had passed. And, you know, she'd passed away from cancer. And he had gone through to a workshop, you know, like what you're talking about. And incidentally, Ian is a chiropractor and just is incredible and gifted at what he does. But obviously, as I mentioned to you backstage, that came to a halt last year. However, when he was in this workshop, he was told one of the myths about the grieving process taking a lot of time. And he decided that it didn't need to take a long, long time. What did happen as a result, as we both witnessed, is that people couldn't come to terms with it. You lost your wife like here, and now you've recovered here. However, he also said that he'd gone through that grief for a lot longer than anybody knew, because it was kind of a private affair, and I think they thought she was going to get over it and she was going to get well. So, you know, I know that he proved to me that you didn't have to be stuck in a loss loop and a grief loop or a trauma loop for 15 years. I mean, that's just crazy. Who's got time for that,
Right.
you know?
And that's exactly right. And one of the sad things is that many people believe you're never going to get over something, meaning you're going to stay in that pain for the rest of your life, like losing a spouse, like losing a child. But the truth is that there are tools to help us move forward. It doesn't mean we're ever going to forget that individual. We're ever going to love them any less or let their memories go. And we might still feel sad, but we can get to the point where we can move through our life without the pain every single day and experience joy again instead of staying stuck in that really difficult state that is very sad and depressing for people and keeps them from living their fullest life.
Oh, look, 100%. And our loved ones, I mean, if the ones that have passed, you know, wouldn't want us to be stuck in that sad loop.
Right.
And as for the ones that may have hurt us or we've been hurt, you know, our higher consciousness doesn't want us to, you know, abandon our own self-worth and what we deserve to claim back our power. So I love all of these, you know, great elements that you're talking us through. So the other element is encouraging, identifying, and acknowledging the significant emotional events in life. And you talk about how you focus in on them. Now, I've been hearing a lot around this lately where don't run away from the pain or ignore it, but face it, embrace it, and feel it to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
Gee, that sounded good, didn't it? I just made
It did. It sounded great.
But can you kind of enlighten us about that?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, when we keep all of our pain inside, we isolate ourselves. And when we isolate ourselves, it keeps us stuck. And it's a lonely place to be. I think we've probably all been there. So many times we don't feel safe, you know, sharing with others what we're experiencing, our emotional pain, because often we're met with, well, I know how you feel because such and such happened to me. Or if someone's passed away, well, they're in a better place. So there's all these intellectual statements that people share with us when they don't know what to say because they want to fix the situation. They don't want to see us hurting. And so they offer something, but they don't realize that what they're offering is actually leading to more pain. Like it can be true that our loved one who is suffering is in a better place, but that doesn't help our heart. That's an intellectual statement, and our heart is hurting, not our head. And so, you know, I always tell people one of the best things you can say is, I can't imagine how you're feeling. Because the truth is, we can't. Even if you and I had the same mother and she passed away, I don't know how you feel because you had a different relationship with her than I did. Every relationship is unique. We never have the same type of relationship exactly. And so it's really important to honor each individual's feelings about an experience and understand that it is unique instead of trying to lump it in. Well, I also lost my mother, so I know how you feel. You might have some of the same feelings that I did, but you don't know how I feel. So it's just really being sensitive to others when they're grieving and, you know, holding space, saying, how can I support you? Versus just offering advice, because grievers need to be heard. They want to be heard, but so often they keep to themselves because of things that they've heard in the past from those that they loved and they trusted.
And that's so true. And I believe we allow a lot of our past stories and paradigms and experiences to affect the flow of how we move forward. when that's the saboteur brain, right? That's the sabotaging part in us that says, oh no, don't do that, or don't say that, or, this is bad, or, it's like the screaming monkey on the shoulder, where, if we become almost surrendered and accepted into where we're at, it's very liberating. Now, you've covered so much in what you have said this far. So I'm wondering if we could kind of like just pick this out here, which is the part where it involves mapping and graphing these life events and losses. Can you talk me through that?
So when I work with my clients and take them through the grief recovery method, we do a lot of different things. One of them you already brought up is we look at the myths that we're all taught earlier in life. And then we kind of look at our whole life and graph out the different losses that we've experienced, because most of us don't realize how much we've gone through in our lives until we actually have it sitting in front of us. Our minds will go to certain events that happened, but we often, forget about all these other little things that equally affected us. So we take a look at that, and then we look at the relationships that are really affecting us right now and keeping us stuck, or the ones that we think are affecting us the most. Oftentimes I find it's actually family of origin issues that have really affected every single relationship and experience in our life. And so healing some of those family of origin wounds is one of the, best ways to move forward in our life.
That's powerful. That's very powerful, because, let's face it, our formative years are between 0 and 7 years old. And, even with well-meaning parents, we pick up their story, their beliefs and what they say to us. And then a lot of the time we make our own meaning out of it. And, if people can really come into that understanding. And I love what you said about, being able to really get it down on paper, because, there's something very freeing about taking it from here and putting it on paper. Do you find that that works well in accountable workshops or programs or mentorship? Or do you get them to do that on their own? What usually works best? And I guess, again, how long's a piece of string? Some people are going to be okay by doing that, depending on, where their emotional, kind of radar is. Others may need that, like the DeMartini breakthrough. He does a very long and arduous, and I say this with the utmost respect, breakthrough, where you're looking at, every single thing that's happened in your life, including those you need to forgive. And you're looking at what that person has done. And regardless of how absurd it may be, you've got to find how you've also done the same thing, and it'll kind of appear in a different way. But I swear, if I wasn't doing that training in his workshop of about, I'd say, 300 plus people in Melbourne at the time, I probably would have just run out of the room and done something else, because you had to literally go through so much. But holding us accountable, and then, of course, breaking through was obviously such an incredible thing. And this happens over a 2-day event, intensive. But what do you generally recommend when you're, getting people to map and graph?
So I always tell people heart work is hard work. It's difficult for most of us to step into this without like a coach by our side, because it does bring up so much emotional discomfort. And so, I work closely with my clients, and I at this point just do one-on-one, because I really feel like then I can give each individual client my 100% attention, and it's not going to, a group of people. It's just going to them, because there's so many things while doing this work that my clients share with me that they've never shared with anybody in their entire life. And so they're choosing to be vulnerable. And it's kind of like I'm there to hold space and hold their hand through it and encourage them and remind them of what their vision is for the future. And that's usually something along the lines of to feel free again, to experience joy, to laugh, to, move forward towards my dreams versus being stuck where they've felt they've been for quite some time.
100%. And for those of you out there, we do have Dawn's links in the show notes, so please reach out. This is bespoke, specialized, work that you're going to do. This method is very, very powerful, and, you get to experience this one-on-one. So through addressing all of these single foundational grief, interconnected emotional pain, do you find that most of your clients do come out released?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have never had somebody come back and say, I wish I would have never done this work. I don't feel any different. Every single client I've worked with says things like, I feel free again. I feel joy where I didn't feel joy anymore. I can navigate this really difficult relationship, because sometimes people come to me because they're struggling in a relationship, whether it's with a partner or a parent. Those are two of the big ones, or a child, and they don't know how to navigate it. And it's so often we want the other person to change, but as most of us know, the only thing we can do is change ourselves. And so when we work on our own healing, we show up differently. And sometimes that is a big enough shift for the relationship to move forward. And so I've worked with multiple people who've come back and said, I can navigate this relationship with my mom again. Like, I don't have the anger and the sadness that I was experiencing before, and feeling like every time I was around her that, I was becoming less of myself. So, and the thing with children, fathers, partners. So this work isn't just for, a loss such as I've lost my job, or I've lost my health, or a loved one has died. It's also for ongoing relationships that you're just trying to be healthy. I mean, I do this work on my own partner. We're both specialists. And so we do our own work so that we don't carry resentments forward. And it's like wiping a chalkboard clean. We're going to start from here.
I love that. I love that. It's, imagining all of the messy dots. I'm seeing this whiteboard and it's got all of this mess all over it. And then the head's in a scramble and you're in this overwhelm and you can't think straight. And then Dawn comes along and goes, one sweep, and then just wipes the board clean. I love that. So, one of the things that I do hear time and time again, and also I shared with you backstage, was, the shock of where my husband, Dr. Ian Messenger, suddenly went into out of control diabetes that has led him to full-time care now, non-verbal, wheelchair. And I honestly do not know myself how I would cope in a situation of grief other than to know what you're talking about around this work. And if I had $1 for every person who said this, I'd fly us back and forward to your favorite place in the world. But how do I take care of myself? So a lot of people see that I am absolutely 100% devoted to being with him every single day. I've only missed one day in the entire time since he's been in there. And look, the honest truth, Dawn, is I feel worse when I'm not there. The only reason I didn't go on that day is because I had a suspected virus that I certainly didn't want to pass on to him. But how do we? This is the number one key secret. And I mean, even though I'm utilizing this as a sort of a key example, what's the number one secret to overcoming grief, and perhaps in terms of taking care of oneself, or what's your belief around that?
So, it's interesting because the stuff we teach is usually the stuff we need to learn the most. And one of my biggest lessons through life and that I want to share with you is that when I or we choose to continue taking care of others and we forget about ourselves, then we can't show up in the best version of ourselves. And it's really hard to set some boundaries and to not always be there for our loved ones, especially when they have health issues and they need us. And so I tell people, even if it looks like 10 minutes, you lock yourself in the bathroom, or a closet, whatever you can do for a few minutes to get yourself grounded and centered. I don't tell people you have to have all day and have a massage and all this, because it's not realistic and it hasn't been in my life. And when I was a young mom, it was those 10 minutes in the bathroom where I could just lock the door and I could just breathe and recenter and refocus. And so that would be one of the things that I would say to you is just, it's okay for you to be there every day, but remember to just make some time each day if you can to breathe, to center yourself, to get in that peaceful space so that when you do present yourself in front of your husband, you are the best version of you. And also be graceful with yourself. Like, we can't show up, it's impossible to show up every single day as the perfect person that we want to be. We all have bad days. And so to just be graceful with however you look and be emotionally honest with people as well. Like, I am not in a very good space today. I'm trying, but this is what I'm experiencing today, and I need to be okay with this, and I'm not going to beat myself up. So I hope that's a little bit of helpful insight.
Yeah, I love that. Transparency and really nurturing yourself. And, a great big, massive gold nugget in there is, when you are looking after yourself, you are then positioned to really take care of others. And
Yes.
I will admit this, that if I had a young family, I'm not sure how I would go, to be honest with you. I'd probably have to lock myself into a closet with a bottle of vodka. Because I did have a situation the other day. I mean, I raised a young family, obviously, and everything else, where I had my very young grandchildren, 3 and 5 years old, and we had an absolute blast. But I literally had them overnight. So it was a 24-hour innings where I was exhausted at the end of it. Now, I'm going to pick your brains a little bit here, because I had this question in my brain going over and over, this question that was driving me insane. Number one, well, I take that back. It was just making me extremely curious. Number one, how does my daughter cope? I mean, I know I was in this situation and she's younger than me. So she's 25 years younger than me. So that makes a big difference. So how does a woman cope in a situation where they're dealing with grief, or they're dealing with this, situation, and they are caught up in that busy life that is a non-negotiable?
That's very, very hard. I mean, I work with people sometimes that just cannot find the time to focus on themselves and do the work. And so I always gently and lovingly remind them that it's so important to take that time. And like I said, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes we don't have the time to do the grief work, but we have time to breathe. And, it's amazing how we can get through things when we don't think that we can. Somehow we come out on the other side, and then we can take a deep breath, and then we realize, oh, maybe it's time that I focused on me. But when we're in the middle of it, um, it's kind of like the fight or flight mechanism that's working. But sadly, our nervous systems end up being on so much of the time that when we do have the time to just take a deep breath and maybe meditate, it's hard to sit still because we've been on so much. And so I just remind people again, we're so hard on ourselves. Each one of us is our own worst enemy. So if we're constantly beating ourselves up about, I'm not making time for me, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves. So be gentle and kind to yourself, and do what you can do.
Yeah.
Make yourself a priority, but also be kind to yourself when it doesn't feel like you can do it right now. And sometimes that priority is, I'm going to choose to get a healthy snack or a healthy meal, or I'm going to choose to go for a walk. It doesn't always have to look like I'm going to meditate, I'm going to journal, I'm going to, go do a personal growth workshop. Sometimes it's the little things, because it's not just our emotional health that's important. It's all of it. It's our mind, body, and spirit, all of that together. So if we can do anything for any of those categories, that's going to help us move forward.
And the last thing that we want is to be stressed out about what we need to do to take care of ourselves. So what Dawn has just explained is so mightily powerful, to heal your heart, to be able to, really look at your grief and be so kind to yourself. And I know that I heard someone who says they set their alarm 1 hour through the day, a nice sounding alarm, and they set up a bit of an anchor for themselves where they take 3 deep breaths, because as you know, Dawn, that regulates the nervous system. And just taking those 3 deep breaths, if you did that on the hour, especially if you are in a trauma loop, or going through such grief. Now, finally, our last question, and I always love to ask this question because it's one of those questions that when you get off and you kind of reflect on what you've really imparted to our guests, what would be the one thing that you would like to share with us, that maybe if you got off this podcast and you never had the opportunity to do so, you'd think, I'd love to do that, because this is going to reach those people that really are praying for your help. Is there any share that you would like to share that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I would really like to remind people that you are not what has happened to you. You may have had so many traumatic experiences in your life, but that's only part of your story. It's a chapter in your book. It's not your whole story. And you have the power to heal, and you have the power to feel joy again and make something different for your life. I look back on everything that's happened in my life, and I now see it as a huge gift. My husband leaving me was one of the biggest gifts I've ever received, because he gave me wings to fly, to find myself and to heal from all the things that had hurt my heart. And I did find joy again, and I experience it every single day. But it was important for me to believe that I wasn't all those events and experiences that happened to me, and that there was more for my story.
That is gold. That is gold. Turning your pain to power, your, your wound to wisdom and your glory to story, and giving that gift of pain wings to fly. Wow, that is so good. So, guys, you can contact Dawn, and we will have the contact details through links on this page, on the show notes. Where would you say is the best place to find you, where you like to hang out?
My website is a great place to find me, and there's links to my calendar. I'd love to have conversations with people and just check in and see what's going on in their life. So feel free to schedule a call with me. But you can also find me on Facebook. I'm on there all the time, or you can send me an email.
Awesome. And is that call with you free?
Yes, it is. Yeah, 30-minute call with me is free, no charge.
That is so beautiful. Well, what can I say, Dawn? Thank you for adding so much value here today, and even giving me so much wisdom. And it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'm honored to have been here speaking with you today.